So you've probably been hearing a little bit about New Earth ascension and higher consciousness and frequency changes. And if you are at all a deconstructed Christian, then you might want to stay tuned because I'm going to share with you some of these stories in the Bible. Welcome back. My name's Angie, and I'm your soul alignment mentor. And I bring intuitive messages that I receive from Spirit to help us all ascend into the new earth energy and a higher frequency. And many of the times I get messages that relate to things that maybe I once understood that Spirit wants me to see in a new way. And as a deconstructed Christian, most of my life from the age of 16 to about 35, 36, I was a very devout, evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic Christian. My first church that I spent time in was a non-denominational church. And then I went to a Bible college to get a degree in Bible. And then after that, I moved into some other types of churches. So I've attended several. The one I ended up in the last that I spent the most time in was the Pentecostal church. And if you've been in a Pentecostal church, you know that it is very charismatic. They spend a lot of time talking about judgment and hell and end times. And then they also spend a lot of time talking a lot about the Holy Spirit, the filling of the Holy Spirit, being able to speak in tongues, and the prophecies that are coming to the earth. When I was in my last years in the church, from around, I would say from 2000 and probably 14 to 2016, the last couple years I spent really devoted to my Christian faith. I spent those years devouring the Bible and looking through it to find the truth. And in many ways, I believe because of my desire, I manifested my awakening. I think I was always meant to awaken because as I've continued on this journey, I can see how things kind of were always set up for me to be in this place and to find my purpose and my calling as a spiritual teacher. However, at the time, I did not understand what that would look like or with who I would be teaching. I always had this idea that I would be a teacher in the church of some kind, and I would have visions of myself on a stage teaching women in particular. And a lot of it was about being pure and staying pure and good enough to be accepted by God. And so when I had my awakening in 2016 and everything began to shift and change for me, it really shook my world up. And a lot of things I was doing to be good enough began to feel uncomfortable for me. I began to feel as if I wasn't being true or authentic to my own self. And I wasn't really truly getting to know the real, what we would call God. And so in 2016, I began to have all these strange feelings about what I had believed, how I believed it, and it kind of propelled me to study even more of the Bible. And as you can see here, I have a stack of Bibles that I used during this time. And I have one right here in front of me that I'm actually going to use to share a little bit today about some things that Spirit is telling me that were actually predicted and Jesus taught when he was on the earth about what is happening on the earth right now. And the interesting thing is when you have a higher consciousness, when you are thinking in spirit, when you are connected in a different frequency and understanding, and you have let go of some of that ego's programming, things become alive. There was always this thing about the Bible being a living vessel when I was a Christian, and that it was truth and there was no flaw in it. However, as I've deconstructed over the last 8 to 9 years, I have learned that that is not necessarily true. It is a very flawed book with a lot of ego in it. And it has been rewritten multiple times and many things taken out and many things added. However, I do think that some of the things they left, or possibly those who wrote this, did have a little bit of insight about what might be coming. The interesting thing about this is that I am not sure that these people truly knew what they were talking about at the time. And over the time, as the faith, the religion of Christianity began to develop, I think that these were left in the Bible for the purpose of possibly causing the followers of that faith to feel fear in order to stay in the faith and to follow what we would call our Savior, Jesus. Because a lot of what you will read from even the red letters of the Bible from Jesus, what they say Jesus said, is kind of warnings about what might happen. And if you don't move in a certain way in your life, then there could be some consequences for you. However, I've began to see these things in a much different light since I've awakened, and spirit seems, and almost as if Jesus' spirit will come and give me insight about what was really being said during this time. And I want to share a little bit about that today, based on what I'm picking up on New Earth Ascension and what is about to happen with the Earth. If you are just finding me, my name's Angie, and I have been getting Ascension messages for about 3 years and New Earth energy and predictions. Now, I am not going to say that I know for sure exactly what's going to happen. However, the messages that I'm getting are very similar to what others are receiving as well. And they begin to come a little bit more clear to me in 2021, about kind of allowing us to learn something before things happen. That way we're prepared. And none of this is happening on the earth for the purpose of harming anybody or causing fear. It is simply a shift that was meant to happen in order to expand conscious energy, to expand the universe. And when you have an understanding that you are source energy and that you are the I am, you are God energy living in a human vessel, you understand that you are a divine, eternal being. And so there is nothing that can harm you in that aspect because you are eternal. And our body, our vessel that we live in while we are on earth, is simply a manifestation of what our spirit wanted to experience and come to earth to live in, to help expand that consciousness of the universe. Now, it is hard to comprehend these things when you haven't ascended into a different frequency or an understanding of these things. And everybody will come at that point when it is time for them. There are people that may feel as if they're behind in their awakening, or they're ahead, or wherever you might be. And the thing is we are all simply in the moment. There is no ahead, there's no behind, there's no competition, there's no any way to try to force something to happen. The only way that you move through this ascension is by trusting and allowing the spirit to work within you. And that is why many of the spiritual teachers for centuries and thousands of years have talked about meditation being a key part of connecting with the kingdom of heaven, which is within you. And so when we talk about what Jesus would share with people about loving yourself and going within and renewing the mind and in love being the greatest thing of all, those are the simple tools that we are given to ascend into higher frequency, into a higher consciousness. Because when you come into the understanding and the comprehension that we are spirit, you understand that spirit is love, and that the only thing that really truly matters is love. So what we're experiencing, or what some of these verses I'm going to share in the Bible are predicting, is the clash between the old thinking and the new thinking. And this is all part of the ego's programming. And this is also why there's been a huge shift in mental health. There's been a huge shift in people healing and doing shadow work and working with spiritual teachers and spiritual guides and healers. And a lot of, as a healer myself, I do healing work with mostly women at this time. I have worked with some men, but what I'm noticing, and that is really interesting, is I worked in the mental health field for over 18 years. And it was just always my calling. It was always my gift. I've always loved serving and helping people. But as I've moved away from the actual societal way of doing mental health into a spiritual teaching and a spiritual healing, I'm noticing a lot of therapists coming to work with me. And they're wanting to add this aspect into their healing work, into their therapy. And the old way of doing the healing, the old systems are beginning to clash against where we're going and where we're ascending, because people are waking up to the understanding that we can't just heal our ego. We just can't heal the mindset of who we are in the place we are. We have to heal and ourself in a spiritual aspect too, like reconnecting with our true and highest self and reconnecting with that higher consciousness, which means breaking down the ego parts that have been programmed in us to ascend into a higher frequency, because there are lower vibration energies and emotions that cannot ascend in the higher frequency. And so people are feeling this urge to purge these old things in their life, the old mindsets. And part of that is religious teaching, is the programming of feeling basically that you have to be good enough for a god that we have made to be this masculine figure up in the sky. But when you move into a higher consciousness, you understand that you are God, that you are the I am, which is what Jesus was teaching. And I share this in my second book, Composting the Ego. We are the I am. Jesus was simply telling people that they are the I am. They are source energy. They come from the same energy. So we are actually, we like to put a hierarchy on things, and we like to think of like Jesus up above us, and then we are like a servant in some way. But in the spiritual aspect and the spiritual understanding, there is no hierarchy. Everything is just one energy. And so Jesus was simply teaching people who they were. And then what we call disciples who came along later, you know, it is said there was a belief, and I believe this when I was in the church as well, that the Gospels were written by the disciples who spent time with Jesus. And as you grow and you learn and you deconstruct and you understand things in a different way, you realize that the Gospels, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were not written until about between 100 to 300 years after Jesus had left the earth, after he had transitioned and passed from his human body. And so many of these teachings are probably, how our parents will say, I remember my grandparents saying this all the time, like, I had to walk uphill both ways to school in the snow, and, all these stories. And so these are the stories that, like, tales that have been sent down between the generations, and they become part of the story of humanity. And so this is really somehow this became, and really religion was what I think their idea of how it would control the world. It worked for a long time, but it's beginning to fall apart because it is no longer capable of being a part of where the earth is going. And so even though they used it in some way to manipulate, and I think there was a lot of good that came from religion. I think religion has helped people. I think there's people that have very good intentions. They want to help people. And I know that for myself when I was in the church and I wanted people to accept Jesus to go to heaven. Like, I had good intentions because I didn't want them to be harmed or go to what we call hell. And as I have grown and I've learned and understood that there is no hell, like, we create hell, we manifest it within our own mind and consciousness, that we can let go of that fear, because fear is an illusion, which is also in the Bible. It talks about that multiple times. Jesus particularly talks about it. Have no fear is something that he said. Do not fear. There's, like, when you step into a higher consciousness and an understanding of who you truly are, that fear illusion that we created in our ego and then placed on a God that we have to be something to be accepted by it, is just simply a lie. So let me get to these stories in the Bible, and I am going to focus particularly in the book of Matthew during this, and I will share these, and if you want to go and read the whole stories yourself, you can. But I want to remind you that a lot of these are rewritten, and there's different versions of these. Like, so I have this is the NIV, and then we have the New King James here. And let's see what this is. I'm not even sure what this one is. It is I don't even know what this one is. This one, it just says Holy Bible. So I'm guessing, and I do know there is a Holy Bible, which I will say a side note. When I wrote both of my books, I had used the NIV to put verses in them to explain things about basically who we are and what the verse maybe really meant. And the Holy Bible was the only one that allowed you to use it without permission. So the Bible is actually copyrighted, and so you have to get permission to use it in creating something or writing something that you publish. And so just a heads up on that. If you do decide to write something and you include Bible verses in it, you do have to you can only use a certain amount of them, and the Bible is copyrighted. And then I have the NIV again. And so it looks like I really like the New International Version, because I have another one, which you can see this one is quite large. So these are all the Bibles, and these were not all the Bibles I had. I had many others that I would study from. But for this sake, I'll use this one, which is the NIV. Looks like my fourth over here. So in the book of Matthew, I'm going to turn into the middle of the chapter here, and there are several stories that are in the red letter. So the red letters talk about what Jesus was teaching. And so I'm going to actually move into, let's see where I want to start here, because I'm just going to point out the stories that Jesus talked about that kind of talk about the new earth ascension. So the first one, and I actually did write about this one in my second book, I believe, the Matthew 13, and this one is about the parable of the sower. And this one talks about scattering your seeds among the soil so that you can grow a crop. And then it talks about how after you've done it, that there were birds that came to eat it and ate it. And then some of it fell onto rocky places and some of it fell in shallow soil. And then when the same sun came up, the plants were scorched because they were not deep enough. And then others fell in thorns, which grew and choked out the plants. And still 160 30 times was sown, and whoever has ears, let him hear. Okay, so let me explain this. This is talking about where you're putting your focus, where you're taking your mind, and what you are sowing into in your life. And there are things that you will sow into that will crowd out the truth of love in your mind. And then some of us will grasp a hold of it, but then the old ideas, the old programming will come and basically choke them out. And then some of them will not go deep into our understanding, into our consciousness, because we don't do the actual inner work to allow it to ascend and to move into us. And so this is why our healing journey is so very important during our awakening, because we have to allow room. The healing is basically like you taking a till out into your garden and getting the soil ready to plant the seed. And so our healing process, our reprogramming of the ego, the shadow work, the trauma work, the inner child work, the meditation, the breath work, all the things that you're using to reconnect with the higher consciousness is the tilling of the old. And so if you garden at all, you know that you have to prepare the soil before the harvest. And so if I go and I did not make a garden or didn't plant a garden this year, but I have weeds all over my garden right now. And if I were to go out and I were to plant some vegetables amongst the weeds would basically cause that harvest to not be as abundant as it possibly could. And so I have to do the work to pull all the old stuff out so I can put new in. And that is what our healing journey is. That is what we're doing when we're doing that inner work and releasing, because we're to plant the new things into our consciousness, into our mind. We have to make room for it. We have to till up the old to allow the new. So that is what that is talking about, is our ascension. Now, there's another, Matthew really has a lot of information in it, but then we have the parable of the mustard seed. And this is where Jesus talks about, I remember having this teaching all the time in the church when they would bring like a little mustard seed just to tell us like, oh, just this much faith is all you need. And, that is true, you guys. It's just that much. But the thing is that much grows into the abundance when you've cleared out all the old. Because you can have something so tiny, a small seed, because this actually says, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is small, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants to become a tree, so that the birds come and perch on its branches. So even the smallest thing that you can do, those tiny steps that you're taking are building something big inside of you. They're allowing you to ascend into a new frequency. And it's hard. But if you understand how a seed works, when you put a seed into the ground, it has to die and it has to break off its shell in order for the inner part to grow. And so this is what this is talking about. It's allowing that part to grow. It just takes one little seed. Then I'm going to move over into, let's see, a couple chapters back. That was in 13 also, Matthew 13. And then I am going there's so many things I could share in here, but I want to share in particular about, I believe it's in Matthew 22. Let me check if I can remember back in the day when I used to study all this. Yes, Matthew 22, the parable of the wedding banquet. And I will share just a little bit about what this says for those of you who have not read this. And Jesus, this is Jesus talking. The kingdom of heaven is like the king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, tell those who have been invited that I have prepared the dinner. My oxen, so basically he's talking about, hey, I have all this food ready. So when they went out to tell the people, they paid no attention to him. And they went about their business. They just kept working. They just kept doing what they always do, what our society has taught us to do, is just keep doing what we do. And then he said to the servants, the wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not come. And so the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find. And it says the bad and the good. So it didn't matter what they were prior. It didn't matter who they believed they were. It didn't matter what life they had lived. They were brought in because these are the people that have done the sowing work. These are the people that have done the healing. These are the people that had come into a higher consciousness, that understood, that got the information of it is time to move into the abundance. Because the wedding feast, if you've, all of us have been to a wedding. Weddings are a celebration. Weddings are full of joy. Weddings are where you have abundance of food, where there's not lack. And so it's almost, this is the new earth of, we are being invited into that ascension. However, we have a choice to do the work. We have a choice to move into that next frequency. We can choose to stay in our ego mind and not ascend. So that is another example of the new earth energy being resurrected. There are many other verses in this book, in Matthew in particular, and I will share one more before we end this. But in Matthew 25, it is the parable of the 10 virgins. And I will share what this says for those of you who have not read this as well. And then again, this is Jesus. Supposedly, this is Jesus teaching about this. At the time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, but they became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang. There the bridegroom. Here, so the bridegroom has shown. It's time to meet him. Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish one said to the wise, give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out. And they said, no, they replied, there may not be enough for both of us. Instead, go and sell oil and buy some for yourselves. But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived and the virgins were not ready to enter the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came and said, Lord, Lord, open the door for us. And he replied, I tell you, I do not know you. So the way that this was taught when I was in the church was that this is basically us being able to go to heaven. And that if we have not accepted Jesus, we cannot go into the wedding banquet. However, When you understand it in a higher consciousness, in a different frequency, in a different energy, you understand that this is simply talking about what we're doing right now. All the work, the inner work to prepare to move into new earth ascension, to move into a higher frequency. Because, like I said, you cannot take old into new. And this is why some of the virgins were unable to ascend into higher consciousness. And I've taught about this before, and I've had visions about the earth. And our ego is not the enemy, you guys. We are not fighting against our humanness. We are simply working with the vessel. And just like any other animal, such as a horse or a dog or even a cat, like whatever animal it is that you want to work with, it is trainable. But it takes training every day, and it takes teaching, and it takes going back and repeatedly doing the same things over and over. And this is why it's so important to add meditation to your life daily. And it's important to check in with yourself daily. And when you're feeling a trigger coming up in your body, or you're feeling upset about something, taking a step back and being conscious and aware of what that is and what is revealing for you. Your body is telling you this needs to be released, because when this is released, you will raise into a new consciousness. And in that new earth energy, you will be in abundance. Because at a higher frequency, when we are moving from the 3D to 4D to 5D, in the 5D frequency, things manifest quickly. In our spirit, in the higher dimensions and realms, when we are back into our true and highest self, in our spirit self, the only thing we have to do is think something, and it is. And that is why we are able to manifest our experiences in spirit. And we have that same spirit. That spirit did not change when we came into these bodies. We simply forgot, but we forgot on purpose for this very reason we're in right now, to help the earth ascend into a higher frequency, to help consciousness raise upon the earth. And we are at that point right now. We are in the energy of ascending, and we are at a beautiful milestone and change upon the earth. But it doesn't all feel good. And if you're not doing the work, it's going to be hard to ascend into that. And so I share these things to help you understand maybe why it feels hard sometimes to do this inner work, but also why it's important to do so. And also why some people may not understand you as you are working through your ascension, as you are working through your healing. It is simply because they are part of that other group that is not preparing themselves for new earth energy. Now, there's no reason to be scared. There's no reason to be upset about anything. We're all on our own journey, and our spirit actually knew what we would do when we came to earth, and whether we would be ascending to new earth energy or we go back to spirit. And there is no true separation. There's only expansion. The entire universe is using this moment, this time, this energy to expand itself. This is a magical moment of God creating more of itself. And that is what we are a part of right now in this new earth ascension. And it's magical, you guys. Magical. So I am going to leave you with that, and I will let you know that if you are a lady looking for a soul tribe and you would like to come join my Women Awaken Circle, I would love to have you. I will drop the link in the comments or in the description below. I would love if you would like and subscribe, and that if you would leave me a review if you're listening to the podcast. I would absolutely love that, and then share it with some friends. Because I know that a lot of people are going through this, and it can be scary and confusing and hard and all the emotions, but it is also very beautiful, you guys. And it is a blessing to be a human right now. And we chose to be here for this. So I send you all the best and most love from the entire universe. And I wish you the best day, night, evening, whatever time it is. Namaste.